All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining. Once again, welcome to all of our attendees. On behalf of the College of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences, I'm very excited to welcome all of you to our Career Week event. This event, Terps Talk Tech, is a panel discussion on maximizing your CMNS degree to land your next or your first tech job, and ways that you can advance your career skills through both academic and professional pathways. This webinar is brought to you by the Alumni Association's Career Week, which is a week-long virtual event series to help alumni and other UMD community members just like you advance your career, elevate your expertise, and connect with fellow Terps. My name is Sarah Dudley. I'm the program manager for alumni relations here at the College of CMNS and the organizer for today's program. Before I introduce your moderator, just a few quick housekeeping items. Keep in mind that this is a webinar format of Zoom, meaning your cameras and microphones are automatically disabled. And you are welcome to share any comments and questions through either the chat function, or we'll direct all questions to the Q&A box. And that can be all found along the bottom of your screen. As a reminder, this is being recorded, and also wanted to note that if you plan to use closed captioning, please use the CC button on the bottom of the Zoom panel. And so now I'm thrilled to introduce our moderator for the event, Mr. Elias Gonzalez. Elias is the Curriculum Innovation Lead with Breakthrough Tech, and he is a lecturer for the Department of Computer Science here at the University of Maryland. He is also a Terp alum, and he graduated with his Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science, as well as a master's degree in Curriculum and Instruction. So Elias, I will pass the mic over to you now.
Thanks, Sarah. Excited to be here for us the first day of the semester. And I'm super happy to be with our three panelists, Amy Chester, Gabriella Boozer, and Katie Heller. First, to introduce Amy. Amy Chester leads the Science Academy at the University of Maryland. Amy oversees program development and student and academic services for the 3 Masters of Professional Studies programs, 2 graduate certificates, and multiple executive education initiatives. By developing a portfolio of offerings that respond to market demand, she brings the university's expertise in the sciences to working professionals. She earned an executive master's in leadership from the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown University in 2019, and an MA in educational leadership and policy studies with a higher education focus, and a BA in communication from the University of Maryland. Next, Gabriella. Gabriella Boozer graduated from the University of Maryland with a bachelor's in community and behavioral health and a scholar's certificate in science, society, and technology in 2020. She works in the technical recruiting space with a focus on helping drive equitable and inclusive new entry hiring. She has previously worked for Github and is now working for the government cybersecurity sector. And last but not least, Katie. Katie Heller is an accomplished tech recruiter. She's worked for multiple companies, including Slack, Imagen Technologies, and Thrive Global. She's certified in inclusive and competency-based hiring and behavioral-based interviewing. Katie holds a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from the Robert H. School of Business at the University of Maryland. Thank you for our panelists for joining us. To kick us off, I'm going to start with a pretty relevant question to all of us today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the current hiring landscape in the tech field. We've all seen the headlines. We've seen a lot of layoffs and hiring freezes. A lot of the big tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Meta, Twitter, and Apple. But they're not the only companies that are looking to hire our, hopefully, alumni, but all of our tech talent today right now. So I'm curious to hear from our panelists. How would you describe the tech landscape right now? And how does that data and those headlines match up with your current experiences in tech? Whoever wants to start.
I'll go ahead and start. Yes, obviously there's been a lot of layoffs. Part of it is there weren't as many layoffs during COVID, and a lot of companies, their first couple of quarters in terms of profit and business strategy are kind of slower quarters. So they re-strategize their business and what they want to focus on going forward in the next year. So with these layoffs, we're seeing a lot of what they call quote unquote low performers being laid off, as well as a huge surge of people who were hired based on future needs rather than actual work currently. So it is scary in the tech space. I personally was also affected by layoffs in the tech space, so I definitely understand what that anxiety is, especially going into that new space. But big tech companies are not the only places hiring. There are a lot of places that are looking for tech people as well. A lot of places like Nike or just places that you don't necessarily associate with tech. A great place that I'm now in is also the government sector. Government sector provides a lot more job security than these tech companies. And once you have government clearance or once you get in the government sector, you really will never be out of employment. They will always be looking for someone. Cybersecurity is also a huge, huge field that I really recommend getting into or looking into, because as we continue getting more technologically advanced, that's going to be a huge threat. I just actually attended a panel with National Security Agency talking about the threat of cybersecurity and the need for more people in cybersecurity and just the security side of tech. So I definitely would recommend, one, looking for companies that you don't necessarily consider technical companies, and then two, government / security sectors of tech to make sure that you're secure in your job.
I could jump in and kind of echo what Gabriella was saying. I too, so at a big tech company, was impacted by a layoff. So recruiting has been one of those skill sets where when you're growing, it's a really great skill set to be in. But then when you're not, when the company isn't growing, also learning that not the greatest place to be or skill set to have as a recruiter. But that being said, yeah, tech hired a lot during the pandemic, and now they're kind of seeing that as the macroeconomic headwinds are impacting industries, not able to kind of keep up with the amount that they hired. Everywhere, aside from tech, most other industries are still actually hiring and are in need of, have more open jobs and still engineers that are looking for jobs. So think healthcare, I think government was, what Gabriella mentioned, really, really great idea, as well as, like Walmart, for example, or just industries where commerce is never going away. And then startups too. Startups are still growing. So while the larger tech companies are freezing and or are downsizing, there's still venture capital firms investing in companies that are, exciting, innovative, and growing. And so I think I'm realizing that this may be a little bit of the time where the job you're in right now may not be the job you're in for the next 5 years. Being nimble, continuously learning new skills, keeping your accomplishments up to date, both at school and then also in your first job and your second job, is great, just to make sure that you are prepared in case of an unfortunate change in business need and downsizing.
Yeah, the computer science department here offers a career fair twice a year. And what I think is really a great demonstration of what both Gabrielle and Katie have mentioned is that it's still going on. The career fair is still wildly popular, and we're just seeing an expansion of the different types of employers that are coming to those events. And so have an open mind. Think about the work you want to do in addition to the type of organization, type of company, type of environment in which you want to work. Think about, look at the University of Maryland, right? Like the university has to hire plenty of tech employees in order to keep the place running, but that might not be necessarily what you think of first for when you think of the tech industry. But retail, I mean, the list goes on. You just have to kind of be creative in how you think about and where you look for those positions.
Perfect. Thank you all for responding. And I'm sure that's comforting for our attendees as well. And I'm actually going to ask a follow-up question based on what Katie just mentioned a little bit towards the end of her response. For those who are currently waiting for those freezes to melt, so to speak, and for those the hiring to begin again, what are maybe some steps that applicants didn't take to make themselves a stronger candidate at that point? Is it continuing education? Is it volunteering and doing projects? Is it non-accredited classes or MOOCs or online classes? Or is it something else? What do you all think?
I can answer, and I'm curious to hear both Amy and Gabriella's opinions too. I don't think there's one right answer. I think depending on looking at where you want to get to that next step, and seeing the gaps that you have, whether that be a specific skill, it could be whether soft, or it could be a hard skill, like a type of, language, let's say computer science or coding language, or sometimes you may be really, really great at Python, let's say, but you may lack project work or working on a team, and you've had some interviews and realized something's not really going that well. Think about the area that you can grow in, and think about what that option is for you. So for me, for example, right now, I'm thinking I lack data analysis skills, and being able to understand reports, analyze and track is something that is important, especially for recruiting these days. And so I'm taking a class on Excel, getting better at that right now. But networking with people that are at companies that you are aspiring to be at, just using LinkedIn, finding somebody that may belong to University of Maryland or is working in a role that you see yourself joining, and trying to connect, see what it's like to work at that company, and see the skills that they recommend, the values and the skills that they recommend building up. And then based on that, create that plan for how you want to use this time. And it is kind of an interesting, if you look at the bright side, opportunity where you can focus on growing yourself, building your skills to be better prepared when the freezes do open or reduce.
In professional and continuing education, or even at the master's level and above, we often see a spike in graduate education enrollments at the time of whether it's recessions or challenges in the marketplace. This is an opportunity to, if you've been trying to decide if you're going to go back to school or if you're going to go into the workforce, maybe the decision is there for you to try to find those skills that you want to enroll in a master's program. Maybe it's not a full master's, maybe it's a certificate program where you want to dip your toe in and try something new. And maybe it's, a time to start reaching out to your old professors, see where they see the industries going, kind of what's new in the research world. Open, again, be broad, but think about those connections beyond just, applying for jobs day after day after day. Kind of think about what else you can do. And also, in addition to those networking conversations, I'd ask others what they would do if they had the time to better themselves professionally, where, there might be other resources available that you might not be aware of besides the traditional, academic programs, but maybe there are some either free or low cost opportunities out there that are events like this, take advantage of what the university and your other, previous experiences could offer.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what both Katie and Amy said. Definitely continuing your education. There's plenty of free or low cost courses that you can take online, and certifications that always look amazing on your resume, even if you haven't completed it, but just even putting, in pursuing, etc. That's an eye catcher on a resume. Passion projects, personal projects. It's always a great look, and it's definitely a very interesting conversation in interviews. It catches my ear, at least when I hear someone very passionate about, the tech that they're using and something they did on their own time. Definitely making sure that your resume is in top shape, that your LinkedIn is in top shape, and also focusing on branding yourself is really important. I don't think that's emphasized enough in I would say, recruiting positions, but you are a brand, and branding yourself is really going to get you in a lot of doors that you most likely wouldn't if you don't focus on that. And then, just always staying up to date on your skills, on the technology that you'll be using in the jobs that you are looking for, and also focusing on transferable skills. So for example, like I was in the healthcare field before I was a recruiter, but I had a bunch of skill sets that were transferable for my job as a recruiter that I really focused in on and honed in on in order to bridge my way into a new field. So focusing on skill sets that you might have used in a different field, but that are very applicable to the tech field are very important. And then networking with people who are in the roles that you want, who are at the companies that you want to go to. You don't know how many people I have been able to, network and connect with simply from just saying that I went to UMD. Not that necessarily that they went to UMD, but they know someone that went to UMD, and that started a whole conversation and created a connection that I am able to have with people at different companies, et cetera. So definitely taking that time to focus on personal development, professional development, and educational development.
There's just one other thing I was just thinking that I might add here. I think it's so easy to think about kind of specific hard skills that are, you can take a quick class in and, practice on your own, things like that. But I'd encourage everyone to kind of think about I hate calling them soft skills. So instead I call them power skills, and think about those power skills where you might be lacking too. Is this an opportunity to look, take some management training, maybe kind of make a move straight from, being on the grounds, but actually moving into a management role too. So think about, those power skills. You'll never call them soft skills again now that I've said that.
I definitely won't. Yeah, I love that thinking that Katie and Amy, you were talking about. It's like looking at it in a positive way, cup, half full, and going back and sort of improving yourself. And Gabriella, I'm definitely going to steal that tip of branding yourself, and I'm going to share that with my students. So it's definitely a great skill for them all. Yeah, to transition to another question, this is more targeted towards Gabriella and Katie at first, but let's say we have a recent graduate, either undergrad or a graduate level, who's applying to their first full-time technical role. What are the experiences that you're looking for when you see their resumes?
Okay, I'll go first. So definitely what I touched upon first, like personal passion projects. Oh, I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying that. And also like academic projects, definitely speaking on what impact you had personally within those projects, and how you took leadership, or maybe you were able to find a compromise, et cetera, are really important, showing that you had impact personally. Any internships are obviously always great, volunteer experiences. I always definitely look to see if people are involved in different groups, Girls Who Code, et cetera, like things like that are a real shining star. Obviously relevant skill sets. If you've taken any classes or any certifications outside of your, basic academic curriculum, or if you're in the pursuit of that, and then, any self-taught technology as well is something that is definitely an eye catcher.
Gabriella, I don't have anything to add. that was exactly, I think you touched on everything that I would have covered. Maybe just emphasizing the impact that you had in whether it was a group project that you're working on projects are great, especially if you don't have your full-time role yet, and that could be in an internship and or just a class project, but talking about how you collaborated, what your role was, and learnings, and also something that maybe it's more of it during an interview versus what's on your resume. The learnings, and everyone makes mistakes, and so remembering those pieces of impact, success, and also if something went the wrong way, how did you kind of get back on track, or what learnings did you have, is something also to kind of keep in mind as you're remembering your experiences that you're putting down on your resume.
Fantastic. That almost answered the next question I was going to ask about where these student experiences and projects should look, where they should be on their resumes, and where it should look. But I'll ask it actually to be more clear is if they are sharing more of their projects and some of those class-based elements of their experience, where should they be? Should they be on their resume, their cover letters? should they bring up during interviews? Where does that fit in? Is it all of those places? What do you all think?
Definitely within your resume, you don't necessarily have to go into super detail. I would say the key place to do that is highlighted in your interview, because that's when you can really speak to it. If it's a personal project or a project of, that you felt was really important, there's never any harm adding as much as you possibly can to your LinkedIn to, like I said, to brand yourself. But I would say interviews are really the place that you can really highlight, once again, your impact and what you did in a project, in a group setting or personally.
The other thing too, to add on to Gabriella, resume and LinkedIn, if you're putting passion projects and or work that you want to then, if you want to work in a similar area as what your project has been on, as recruiters, we're using keywords to find candidates or find applicants or qualified individuals for roles. And so the more context you can put on your LinkedIn, the more likely you'll show up in different searches recruiters are having to reach out to you as opposed to applying. So you should be both proactively applying, networking, developing your skills, all of those things during this time, but also, like Gabriella said, the brand idea, making a little bit more of an example of what you can do and the reason why putting the information on your LinkedIn will help the SEO, search engine optimization, or just keyword searches on LinkedIn. You appear in those lists of candidates that have the skills or the power skill, both the hard skills as well as those power skills that we may be looking for.
I thought we had a question about GPA. So personally, I mean, if you have a very low GPA and you put that on your resume, I think anyone would notice that. But personally, I don't necessarily look for GPA, or I wouldn't necessarily recommend even putting it on your resume. Really, it's about, if your degree is relevant to the job, and if you, have other things to back that up. So I wouldn't really recommend putting a GPA on your resume unless it's like a 4.0, which is like, oh, okay.
I was gonna say like 3.8 or a higher, maybe. Yeah. That's actually like a really, oh wow, impressive. But otherwise, I don't think it's not something that I'm looking for either.
Yeah.
Got it. And to our next attendee, I'll definitely ask that question in a moment. But I don't want to let Amy escape from these types of questions as well. And I'll ask Amy more specifically with the graduate school application. What types of experiences and what types of maybe words do you see when you're looking at these applications?
Yeah, this is something when you're applying to graduate school, you've got to jump off the page, because most programs, you don't have the opportunity for an interview at this level. So there's no chance to really talk to the professors and really kind of give them more information. So you got to put it all in that application. And you also want to remember that they're all looking at your transcripts too. So you don't need to reiterate what's on your transcript. It will already be there, but you might be able to provide a little bit more context to what's happening on your transcript. If there's some stories to tell, if there was a tough semester, make sure you identify it. Don't wait for them to make assumptions. Talk about it ahead of time. If both good and bad, I would say, you want to kind of provide a little bit of context to there. At the University of Maryland, you're required to, most programs will also ask for a statement of research or work experience. So this is a great opportunity to talk about previous projects, skills that you have, and really give some examples. I would strongly encourage not to upload pages and pages of code. People do it, but what would be more meaningful, I think, is kind of sharing some competencies that you've gained from those projects, skills, excitement. What's the so what of some of these projects? Did this make the connection to the program or the job or the area that you want to go into, and provide again a little bit more of kind of the what you did on this project and what you learned. The personal statement, I always like to think of the personal statement as looking forward as opposed to kind of looking backwards. Every program is a little bit different. It also depends on how much space you have for a personal statement. Typically, they're relatively short, 1 to 2 pages max. So instead, in the personal statement, I'd like to see what you want to do and how you're going to get there and what you're going to contribute to the program. If you have an opportunity to explain your research experience, or even if it's not technically research, if it's project-based, I think that's okay too. But again, you gotta give some more context to your application and to your transcript when you're thinking about graduate school.
Awesome, thank you, Amy. I'm going to go ahead and ask the question that's in the Q&A. How would you describe the interdisciplinary nature of the tech space? How can people use other skills or interest areas in the tech industry if they're not explicitly tech related?
Happy to start. Tech industry, I would say, is actually more interdisciplinary than fully individual work, autonomous heads down coding. There are some of those jobs that exist if that's of interest, but most jobs, let's say, and really the tech industry, there's software engineering and various kind of like sisters of, or brothers, cousins of coding, but then there is work in designing what you're building. There's all different kind of skill sets around managing projects, determining what their work actually going to be building, coding. But in all of these different skill sets within tech, and those are just a few, there are so many more. Leadership, mentoring other individuals, developing programs around luncheon, like learning around coding, whether it is managing teams within that. So management, working together, collaboration, providing feedback, skills and interests. I'm just naming a few different skills outside of just hands-on kind of technical skills. But I think it's probably, or the long short of it is, I think it's more interdisciplinary than not. Maybe if somebody else wants to add in additional context, I can think a little bit more about examples.
Yeah, so I definitely think like collaboration is humongous. You are going to be collaborating with people at every step of the way, but regardless of what tech role that you get. So definitely being able to communicate, effectively, being able to be a listener is huge, being able to make sure you are inclusive in your collaboration. So making sure other people feel comfortable collaborating with you, that you're hearing people and actually listening and caring about their opinions. Because a lot of these tech companies, which I think we'll probably touch on later, talking about the interview process, but are focusing a lot on your cultural fit. So during the interview process, we're going to be making sure that you are a cultural fit for our company and our values and what we want with our workers. So making sure that you really highlight that you're able to work well with others, and leadership, mentorship, just being able to work effectively and well in a good space with others is definitely a huge skill set that I think people don't necessarily think of when they're thinking of tech, but it's really, I think, what I've seen as a highlight of skills that is focused on just as much as if you're good at coding, et cetera.
I'll give just a quick example. We see and know the importance of communication in the sciences so heavily that actually in our Masters of Data Science program, we have a communication course that's required in the final semester, because you've got to know how to talk about your learnings and how to talk about your work to people who aren't experts like you are. And that is so critical. And if you're able to do that successfully, it's really going to give you a leg up, both in getting in the next job, but then also completing your current work.
Fantastic. That's definitely something I share with a lot of my students. Unfortunately, all of our projects are individual for the most part, but this interdisciplinary and this collaboration is something that they have to have for working in the real world. So I'm glad you all are sharing that as well. So moving on to a next question of, would you say that there's a typical or expected hiring process in the tech industry, or are all of the hiring processes highly specialized? Is there a commonality between all interviews that you've had, or are they very different depending on the job that you're applying to?
So typically, well, I'm just going to break it down like through the process. So typically the total interview process, if it's a good one, would take about a month and a half from, applying to offer stage. You're usually going to have a technical round. So based on your disciplinary, this will either be like a screening round to see if you can even get into the actual final rounds of the interviews, or later on in the final round of the interviews where you'll be, for example, at GitHub, you would be working collaboratively with someone who you would be working collaboratively with if you were working at GitHub. So it was like a live demonstration of using the tech and showing that you're able to use the tech and explain, what you're doing while you're actually completing the technical round. So that's definitely a typical process for different roles, even in roles where, for example, a customer success architect, so they're not necessarily a technical person, but they are the person explaining, technicalities to, non-lay person or lay persons. You also had to go through a technical round to really display that you understood, the technical background behind what you would be explaining to your customers. So usually that, and then obviously you have your first initial round where it's just basic questions. We're getting to know you as a candidate, see if you would be a good fit. And then there's definitely usually multiple rounds of interviews with different professionals that you be interacting with and working with. Some interview stages have an interview with a hiring manager, some do not. It kind of depends on your leveling in the cases that I've seen. A huge thing that tech companies are integrating are behavioral and cultural based interviews. So definitely focusing not on your ability to just be able to use the technology, but who you are as a person. And like I said, if you are a cultural fit for the company, to see if, but what I mean cultural fit, I mean like, if you're be able to collaborate with people, if you're able to be conductive in a certain type of space, not necessarily non-inclusion, but so focus on behavioral, focusing on who you are as a person, focusing on if you'd be a fit, if you'd be a fit on the team that you'd be working on. And then a huge thing is star-based questions. So situation, task, action, and results. So let's say I'll ask you, for example, tell me about a situation where you were in a group and you couldn't see eye to eye with someone. How did you come to a compromise and how did you meet a common goal? So those are very, very common questions. So being able to be prepared or be a fast thinker when those questions come up is really important. And then there's different cadence to different interviews. Some will be individual-based interviews, some where you'll have 3 interviews back to back to back. So just definitely be prepared to have blocks of your day cut out for interviews, and definitely be prepared to, go through different rounds of interviews at different places, different companies. But yeah, each company definitely has a different based interview process. So just expect some differences depending on where you're applying to.
And I would say, just coming from a few different companies as Gabriella too, there's zooming out, there's like an initial interview with a recruiter and or a hiring manager that's not necessarily technical, some type of technical screen, whether it be an online challenge through their numerous platforms like HackerRank, could be like LeetCode does some different types of online coding kind of tools, and or just a project where you're not actually doing a live coding challenge, but doing something on your own and then maybe walking through it with somebody on the team afterwards. And then behavioral-based interviewing questions, like what Gabrielle mentioned, where you're meeting with different teammates and talking about kind of your experience, story, situations that you've been in, and then also the values of the company, and if there's a mutual interest and alignment. So usually an initial background-based conversation where you're getting with typically a recruiter, understanding your timeline, a little bit of background, your interests, what's important to you. And then as long as there's some basic relevant, black and white things, like you're interested, the compensation / the timing makes sense. There's some type of technical, varies, different companies have different strategies for how they like to assess the technical piece. I think it's more maybe inclusive and more futuristic to not do that online coding, because sometimes it just may not be great at those live time challenges, and maybe a better thinker if you have your time to kind of focus and then kind of review. I don't know if there's an exact strategy. Each company does it a little bit different, but there's a mixture of both technical or project based, and then those power skill type behavioral based interviewing questions that you'll likely see. And interviewing is a skill, so the more you do it, the better you get. And there's definitely, I would say, in this downtime, there are companies that still do those live coding challenges. And so LeetCode, LeetCode, I know for some of the companies that I've worked for, there are just algorithmic based questions that you probably aren't using on the day-to-day, but you learn them in school. And so sometimes what's funny is people that are graduating more recently actually perform higher on those coding challenges because they're more used to these problems in school. And as you work in the actual professional world, you're not actually using them on the day-to-day. So that's why it's a little bit controversial, but they're not totally, there's some companies are still using those. So in the downtime, one of those things that you may want to be practicing up on are some of those, coding problems that you may see on websites like LeetCode.
I also want to add, interviewing is definitely a skill set. And one thing I think a lot of people feel very discouraged when an interview doesn't result in an offer, but it's really important to realize that each interview is a very big lesson, and you can, review how it went and then use what you learned from that interview in your next interview. So it's really important to not be discouraged just because the interview didn't go exactly how you wanted. Also, interviews are very intimidating. I personally like to make my interviews more casual and fun, because who likes to be interviewed for jobs? But definitely be personable, be authentic, be yourself. It's really important, and it really shows, and it makes the recruiter's life easier as well. And if you can get a connection with the recruiter, you don't know how far just having that personal connection can go, and a recruiter advocating for you, because we do want to advocate for a candidate when they're a good candidate. So definitely, practice your interviewing skills.
One final thing, and Amy, I'm sure you also from the graduate side and helping professional candidates or students get into the professional world, recruiters at companies should prep you on your interviews. And so whether it's a conversation that you're having with, I'm sure both of us do that with our candidates, make sure that you're prepared on what to expect and give you time to prepare if you need some more time. And then also a lot of companies these days are putting their interview process on websites, on their career page. Sometimes there's an engineering blog where they may have information on their interview. Sometimes it's on YouTube. Like different companies are doing that. I would say maybe it's more so happening in the tech industry as opposed to that non-tech, but who's to say it's not? And in this time also, I think we're going to see a balancing of talent going to different industries and maybe modernizing some of those just interviewing, for example, that may be a little bit more modern in tech than in non-tech. I think I'm going off topic here, but you will be prepared. If each interview is a little bit different, and you should be prepared. And if you may not have preparation, it is totally cool and recommended to ask, what should you expect if a recruiter is not giving context.
Perfect. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you all for responding. Our next question is sort of finding yourself within the tech space. So there might be audience members who want to work in tech, but don't necessarily know what specific role they want to do. What advice would you give to these individuals who are trying to find where they fit exactly within tech?
So definitely doing your research on different roles, seeing, what the typical day-to-day workflow of that role would be, what would the typical duties of that role, what technology is used in that role, and the skill sets that are relevant, and also the experience required or the basic qualifications required for that role. Networking with professionals that are already in the field that you might be interested in, asking, finding their LinkedIn profiles, going through LinkedIn, just seeing, what skill sets they have listed, what courses they might have taken, what certifications they might have, and then reaching out to them personally, asking about, their experience within that role, and asking for advice, what they would recommend if you're pursuing that, is definitely helpful. But yeah, there's so many resources. When I first started to transition into tech, I thought I wanted to go into a tech focused role rather than a non-tech role. So I personally did a lot of research, and I took a couple courses online for free before I decided what I wanted to do. So it's definitely just personal research, and reaching out to people that are already in that field and kind of getting a feel for what your interests, what you're looking for, and then if that role aligns with that.
I have a little activity that I would recommend someone do. And it's, you kind of, you have two lists going side by side, and you can have a list of like companies and organizations and environments in which you want to learn or you want to work. And that one's the easy one, right? Like you can just go to their pages and see what their open jobs are. But then the other list that I think is maybe even a little bit more important is the type of work you want to do. And that's where you have to kind of do a little bit of self-reflection, because, beyond the very standard like software engineer position that might be up there on every single page, give a little bit more thought and like context into what you want to do every day, what kind of skill set you want to practice every day, what type of team you want to be on. And some of those things on those two lists might align, and hopefully they do, but they might not align like in your very next job. And so keep in mind that you might be looking for, your day job, but you might also be looking just to get a foot in the door if you're really passionate about working at one specific company. And it might not be your exact dream job today, but it might lead you to that tomorrow. So again, I encourage everyone to to force themselves to do both of those things and then see where there's alignment.
Fantastic. So thank you all for responding. I do want to make sure that we open up the panel to questions from the attendees. So feel free in this moment to go ahead and submit any questions to the Q&A on Zoom, and we'll go through the questions as they come. I already see we have one from Vincent that we'll ask. So again, I encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A, and we're happy to answer them, and I'm happy to pose them with the remaining time we have left. So I'll go ahead and pose Vincent's question. I have not done software in 15 years. I had a health problem related to sitting and typing. That problem is now resolved. I did low-wage retail jobs for the last 15 years. How can I build my resume or whatever to get a job in software development now that I'm better? Should I get a master's degree? Should I improve my skills by learning to use web page development software such as ASP.NET, C#, Razor, Python, or Django? So what advice would you give to Vincent?
Vincent, happy that you're feeling that you're better and you're interested and excited to get back to software development, which seems like you did earlier on in your career. You probably know this more than I even do. Software, the tech industry's like language even and type of coding has changed a lot in the last 15 years. And so I would say parallel process, learning some more modern web development skills. And also that's something to think about too, even just jumping into what types of skills. There's a bunch of different types of coding you may be doing. For example, I don't know if this didn't exist 15 years ago, but AI, for example, is way more relevant, and there's tons of jobs within machine learning, for example, today. It may not even existed or been as prevalent 15 years ago. Thinking about what type of software engineering or software development specific kind of niche you want to move into, I don't think it can hurt to start with updating your web development skills. But doing so, learning a new skill, working on a few personal projects to start building that recent examples of work that you were doing. GitHub, I know Gabrielle worked for GitHub, doing maybe some, what's it called? Just contributing to different code bases where recruiters or hire engineers themselves can kind of just look and see the work that you've done. And you may want to, this is an interesting, you're kind of you've done software development, but then you're pivoting back into it after a period of time that you weren't there. You may want to, your first job that you take may not be the last. And so oftentimes it may be a contract job to get some working experience right away and then move into full-time. For example, or freelancing, just to kind of build up that more recent experience that may be a little bit easier to get an opportunity to do than a full-time job right away. So yeah, figuring out what types of skills you want to, or what type of engineering you want to do, and then those skills that will help kind of make you relevant, and then working on some projects to help build up that resume or that experience even as you start getting jobs in software development. But there will be companies or people that need your help. So I think it's a good time to be working on beefing up those skills.
And from an educational standpoint, I would just encourage you to think about both. It doesn't need to be an and or. There are a lot of professional programs, both here at the University of Maryland and then elsewhere, that you can start master's degrees. You can do part-time. There are an enormous amount of professional programs out there that accommodate working professionals, but then you can also make progress towards a graduate degree.
I was going to add, the software development field is quite large. You can go in specific niches, and you can do, just regular, typical basic software development. So definitely focusing on, more modern languages is huge. Golang, Ruby, any language that's come out in the last 5 years that companies are going to be looking for, because a lot of companies are, changing their framework, changing the languages that they use. So that's a standout point, because a lot of people who have been in the field for a long time don't have those skill sets, or have to be taught those skill sets, be ramped up. Definitely personal projects, contract work is a great opportunity to get in the door quicker than a full FTE role. And to touch on what Katie said, yeah, GitHub, putting a GitHub link in your resume and showing that you've been collaborative on multiple projects is a great way to showcase your skills. So just to touch on that.
Fantastic. Yeah, our next question here is, what are the best ways to present or make up for a lackluster resume?
I would challenge you to rephrase your frame of thinking on lackluster resume. Just because you don't necessarily have, the experience for a role, especially if you're a new grad. I mean, kind of ridiculous that some places are like 3 years experience, new grad, because you're a new grad. But really focus, like I said, on earlier transferable skills. So skill sets that might not be your typical tech skill set or what's listed as a skill set on the job posting, but that is really important. So for example, project management or leadership or anything that's just can be applied to multiple situations is really something to focus on. And you can still emphasize the experiences that you had or have, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're lackluster. I would just focus on the way that you brand those experiences and the way that, like I said, you brand yourself. So turning those negatives into positive and marketing it in a way that is, selling yourself, rather than trying to say, oh, well, I don't have this, because then that focuses on the negative. So reframing the, I guess, state of mind in which you're looking for. Also, there's a lot of resources online to give you examples of resumes that you can follow. There's a lot of resources that you can follow for LinkedIn that are all free, and they will actually give you a template to go by. Canva is a great resources for building a great resume. They have so many templates. I strongly recommend using Canva. I use Canva to build my own resume. I use Canva. I actually, if anyone wants, I do help with resume building. So I use Canva to help other people with their resumes. I definitely strongly recommend going on there and just checking out the templates they have. But just highlighting the experiences and skills that you do have already is the important factor, rather than focusing on the fact that you don't necessarily have that experience that is on the job posting.
Fantastic. Yeah, in the interest of time, I appreciate everybody's. We have some wonderful questions in the Q&A, but I do want to make sure that I give the panelists maybe some last advice they want to give to our attendees, and if they want to respond to any of the questions that are in there as well, they can feel free to. But yeah, I'll just open up for a last maybe pitch from you all. What are some advice? What are your 2 cents for somebody who's looking to get in the tech space before we go?
I would just say, first off, attending events like this, you're doing the right thing. You're doing great, and be proud of being a Maryland alumni. I think, the core education really speaks highly to what you're capable of. Be proud of that, talk about it, make sure it's highlighted, use it to connect with you, reach out to your undergrad programs, any connections you have to campus, stay on those listservs, because job opportunities come across in a lot of different ways, but maximize the resources that being a Terp will follow you. And I'd also, encourage you to look at programs such as the Science Academy that are designed for working professionals. There's a lot of graduate education opportunities out there, both from, reskilling and retooling, but also, doing something totally new, career changers, pivoters. There are opportunities out there to find and look for the best program for you. And it might not be the first one you look at, and it might not be here at Maryland's, but I know that the right programs are out there for the right phase of your life. Good luck.
I think your first job is not going to be your last job, and getting that the brand thing is more important today than I think it was a year ago and longer. And so thinking about what that means, and thinking about in the experiences you've had at school, out of school, a framework that's easy to apply is situation, task, impact. And that could be how you present information, like on LinkedIn. What impact did you make? And what are your goals? And what have you done in order to kind of share that you can be there? And so thinking about connecting with different alumni, with different, like what Amy had said about using the UMD network, and also just continuing to kind of think about where do you want to be and where are you now and what do you need in order to kind of help build that bridge to kind of get to where you need to be, is a work in progress. And yeah, there's no time to the present to start. And have some grace for yourself. This is a little bit of an interesting time, and everyone is empathizing, I think, more than ever with looking for a job and starting your career at this time.
I would say try to have a positive frame of mind going into the job searching opportunity. I know it's hard. I've been there myself. Like I said, I was affected by the layoff myself. But everything is a learning lesson, and you can use it to move on to the next step and better yourself professionally and personally forward. Definitely focus on branding yourself. Impact. I cannot emphasize that enough. Impact. focusing on the impact that you have everywhere you go is huge. It's really a great way to, why does a company want you? Because I'm impactful. Boom. So definitely focus on that. Don't necessarily get hung up on these huge tech companies. Of course, a title and a fancy company is nice on anyone's resume, but when you are looking at a company, really look at what you want from that job opportunity. Really look at if that's what you want to be doing every day, if this, is a good work-life balance, if they give me the benefits I want, if they're giving me the compensation I want, if I feel included in this workspace, if their cultural values, if their mission is aligned with what I want, if I have opportunity to grow there, et cetera. Those are huge because that can really play a part in your career journey as well as, your personal mental health. And then networking, it's huge. You can really get opportunities that you would have never imagined just from knowing somebody. And, one of the things I see, we have to have LinkedIn up all day, every day as a recruiter. Every day I'm seeing people posting, hey, my friend is looking for a job. Here's her resume. Here's her skill set. Those are huge. And that's exactly what networking can do for you. So really focusing on connecting with alumni from Maryland. We have a very big network, or just connecting with people in the field is really a great resource. And then always be a continuous learner and have a be curious attitude and always want to improve on yourself. And yeah, each step is a stepping stone, and don't feel defeated in this process. Just keep on going.
Fantastic. Thank you all for your final thoughts. I love the positivity. I definitely agree. Like, tech is such a big field. It's so changing so much. Staying as a learner and being positive is a big step. So thank you all. And I'm going to pass off the torch to Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful panel. I really enjoyed listening to it, and I'm sure our attendees did too. So thank you all so much for your time and your expertise. I also want to take a quick second to thank our sponsors for the Career Week, and that is Terps Card and American Pacific Mortgage Company. As a reminder to our attendees, a recording of this webinar will be sent to the email address that you signed up with. And if you have any questions about any of the topics that we talked about here today, about the Alumni Association's Career Week, the Alumni Association in general, or anything happening here at the college level with our CMNS alumni events and other events that we have going on all the time, please feel free to contact me. And I hope to hear from you all soon. In the meantime, I really appreciate all of the great questions and your active participation. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.